Welcome back on the AM show. Time now for us to get into the papers this Tuesday morning. And we kickstart by letting you know that Endpoint Homeopathic Clinic is calling. They sponsor this segment and they are offering you, if you're a man, prostate screening for free. If you're a woman, fertility screening for free. Now, here's where you can locate them across the length and breadth of the country. Here in Accra at Spentex, opposite the Shell signboard, Kumasi, Krodumabwe here behind the Angel Educational Complex. There's Takrady and Naji State, Tema Community 22, Techiman Hanswa, and Esiama and Zema. Their call lines, if you care to call, which I think you should, 0244 867 068 or 0274 234 321. Endpoint Homeopathic Clinic, the end to chronic disease. But just the start of the news review, and I have joining me in the studio Afil Moni. He is former president of the Ghana Journalists Association. Good morning. You look, as always, fabulous. Is it the same?
Yes, please.
Taylor, your designer?
Yes, Oman.
The young man?
Yeah, young man, Oman.
All right. We'll give Oman his props for always decking you out in fabulous colors.
Thank you.
And
Thank you.
exquisite tailoring.
Thank you.
Well, here we are. Like I would usually do, I'd like to find out what you've thought about some of the stories that have taken place over the last few weeks, or the last week, actually. There's also Akosombo still on our radar. But I'm curious, for the first time, if not ever, the Ghana Journalists Association is going to have its awards program, and it's going to be held in the day.
On Sunday.
Yes. Yes. And it's not going to be the usual nighttime affair. There are a few changes here and there. What do you think about the new, I wouldn't say seismic shifts, but new things happening in the Ghana Journalists Association?
It's good to innovate. It's good to think outside the box. Many of those who will be complaining about the late night event, sometimes the event travel to the wee hours of the morning.
Yeah.
And this,
Before you get to realize who was journalist of the year.
Yeah, that sort of thing. And we tried it once. We did it at 10 o'clock in the morning, and people were complaining. And they came back to us, how on earth can anyone eat dinner in the morning? It's supposed to be a dinner something. Yeah. So we're compelled to go back to the evening, and the complaints were still. And the fact is, it's not within the bounds of possibility to please everybody.
Right.
And this is the first time in the history of the GJ that the event will be held on Sunday.
Yeah.
And in the afternoon.
And at that time of day.
Yeah, 3 p.m. So let's see how it will. And yeah.
Well, I think, it's a weekend. So
it's a weekend.
Not many people actively working, though some do now because of virtual work. Yeah. I mean, people still do some stuff on Sunday. And again, the time. Anybody would have probably gone to church or had their time to pray and all of that. So we'll see how
nothing is set in stone.
It balances out. Yes, indeed. Any other story, anything that has caught your attention over the last week that you'd like to briefly share with us before we get into the papers?
The dominant story, this village and its untold hardship, it has inflicted on thousands of people in the Volta, Eastern, and then we are told that in parts of the Bron-Afon region, and the partisan
rhetoric, back and forth, banter.
Yes.
And the fake news.
Yeah. So I think this is the time to dial back the escalating remarks, comments, and to scale up efforts to assuage the suffering of the people in the affected areas. And one story which is bannered in one of the newspapers, the MPP is accusing former President Rawlings of former President Mahama,
right?
Yeah, for putting a partisan slant on the crisis or disaster, and this will not,
I don't know which one you're referencing though, because there was talk about if it had been in the Ashanti region or something, and apparently it's fake news. Are you aware of that?
I'm not aware of that.
I think even I saw Koku Anyidoho post it, and people went after him because it had come to the fore that that news was not credible. In fact, I believe the former president's own page on Twitter, or one of his social media pages, had put it out clearly that it was fake news and that had never been uttered. I just don't know whether that
I
is
think the Daily Guide,
I don't know
Daily
whether
Guide
it's
has
the same
captured the
one
story.
you
Daily Guide
referencing.
has captured the story. Daily Guide, that's the...
Maybe we can get into it, so
and
we can cut into it, because it says here, the banner headline, NPP slams Mahama for politicizing Volta floods. So let's see whether it's related to that story. The flag bearer of the opposition, NDC, and his party executives have been slammed for politicizing flood victims' misery by the NPP after they used the issue to criticize the government. Severe flooding has hit some areas in Volta and eastern regions, and towns and villages along the lower Volta enclave affected after a spillage from the Akosombo and Kpong dams. Let me cut to where he is quoted to have
Against the
said,
tail end of the story.
yes, it is clear that the scope and scale of the flooding of communities along the Volta River is bigger than our crippled economy can bear. I recommend to the government, so this is what is quoted here.
Yeah.
I'll read it to you so that you react. It is clear that the scope and scale of the flooding of communities along the Volta River is bigger than our crippled economy can bear. I recommend to the government to declare a state of emergency in the affected areas. So that's something else I'd like you to reflect on. State of emergency, should we declare that Article 31 and the Emergency Act, from our bilateral and multilateral partners, and request relief assistance from our bilateral and multilateral partners immediately. This is said to have been on Facebook. Let me see whether there are any other quotes. And so responding to that, Mr. Ahiagba, we all know him, he speaks for the NPP, stated that the NPP would not allow the opposition to use ethnocentric remarks to sow discord and instability in the country. It says, quote, the idea the government will stand aloof and have people suffer is something that I cannot fathom. But that was the notion the NDC and its flag bearer was advancing in the Volta region, creating the impression government didn't care about them, and it was painful. So this is what is quoted here.
Yeah.
Because the other thing I saw, I could pull it up, was something else that I think suggested an ethnic slant, which has been debunked, and I'm yet to see any video or audio evidence that suggests that this was said. But from what is said here, I recommend to the government to declare a state of emergency in the affected areas and request relief assistance from our bilateral and multilateral partners immediately. And then it is clear that the scope and scale of the flooding of communities along the Volta River is bigger than our crippled economy can bear. These are the quotes I see here. And it also says, maybe let me just add, because I want to get all. He pointed out that when the unfortunate incident happened, the NDC was in the Volta region campaigning and telling the people that, quote, because they are averse, the government will not support them. And this I see to be unfortunate. But this statement itself has been debunked. But of course, you know how the politics is in this country. From both sides, the MPP and the NDC. Your reflections?
I think partisanship should not come into play in this disaster at all. And the tendency to refract almost every issue in partisan lenses should be dustbined. If anything, it worsens the plight of the victims. And what the two parties end up in doing is the perpetration of sorrow. They deepen the sorrow of people who are really and who are weeping, gnashing their teeth, and who have lost almost everything they've fought for since they came on earth. So the two parties, please, this is the time to think of how best to mobilize resources, how best to ensure that we find a permanent solution to this crisis. And global warming is a reality now. Whether we like it or not, the script has flipped entirely as far as the weather pattern is concerned. So in all likelihood, the spillage will occur as the rains fall in torrent. So the time has come to think outside the box, to find a lasting solution, long-term solution to what is happening, so that we didn't come back to this crisis year in, year out.
Yesterday, I had a conversation with engineer Abdullahi Mahama Saji, who is with NADMO, and some other stalwarts, Bernard Mona, who has also been on the ground. And you know, the picture painted, while there are solutions that have been proffered, and while other countries have also, you know, done things with hydro dams and all of that, I just didn't get the feeling that we would find any resolution to this matter anytime soon. That was the feeling I got, because Abdullahi Mahama, while he may not be a dams expert, he's a road building consultant. He put certain ideas forth. And the reality too, if we allow the dam to be breached, that could be disastrous. Entire communities. Some parts of certain regions could go under. The death toll could be staggering. Entire communities could be washed away underneath. Like you would see the Volta Lake or the river, sometimes you would see stilts, stumps, entire, and it's not something we can even fathom. It's not an emergency that I think our country is ready to deal with. We're simply not there. We cannot deal with a disaster like that. But in this instance, something has happened, and if we have to continue with this cycle, you see, we're knee-jerk reacting people. We like for the thing to happen, then, it's not happened in 50 years, so we didn't expect it. Or last year we expected some of this, it didn't happen, so this year, and then it happens. We are so reactionary, and it becomes problematic. I don't know, but I just get the feeling that we're not going to see the end of this anytime soon.
So if you square this against the logic of climate change,
right,
it reinforces the need for something more serious. State of emergency, I'm not a technical person, but I think the cause, have been more strident for the declaration of state of emergency. I believe this will give the states the necessary legislative powers to intervene more effectively as far as this disaster is concerned. So I think it should still be on the board for consideration.
I'll just look at what Samuel Koku-Anyedaho posted. He spoke about the president talking about, if it's a question of who votes for me and who doesn't vote for me, then I shouldn't be here because you didn't vote for me, but that is not my concern. And in any event, one day you will vote for me and my party. That's the president. He puts it side by side with what the former president purportedly said, which has been debunked. So I want to just clearly quote it for you. Akufo-Addo does not want to come to the Volta region to inspect the havoc of the spillage. If it were the Ashanti region, he would have rushed there. Our Evers, not human beings too, are Ashantis more human than Evers. And that is the quote that has been debunked. And like I said, I am yet to see any video or audio evidence supporting that. So
certainly such comments are toxic, and as media practitioners,
it doesn't matter.
We should not amplify them. We should not at all.
Definitely not. Definitely not. While in this case, we are being informed that it is fake, for future purposes, we should, because there are times when they have gone on that trajectory.
Sure.
Our political parties, they have gone on that trajectory in the past. Asantini, Esremuni, this and that. All the nini is not necessary. When you cut that person, will blood flow? Will the blood be red?
Not at all.
It will be same, just as everybody else. But
again,
I guess some people feel more
gatekeeping on the part of the media. Gatekeeping on the part of the media. None of those toxic comments should be allowed to find space in the media. So they should be dustbined. In fact, they belong to the dustbin, and we should ensure that they remain there.
Daniel Coleman says, watching the show live from Ahafo Kenyasi number 2, Jericho. One thing I like about Ghana, you'll find all kinds of places here. You'll find Hong Kong, you'll find Russia,
Jerusalem.
I don't know whether there's not Galilee. I think I mean Jericho,
the Galilee,
and all
yes.
of that. I think it's Kaswa
Yes,
Galilee,
yes,
right?
Galilee, yeah.
Hey, Ghana. you don't need to travel anywhere. You just need to find Galilee in Ghana.
La Paz.
Jerusalem in Ghana.
La Paz, capital of
Bolivia. Bolivia, yes. Anyway, so let's get into the papers now. Let's start with you. What papers do you have? And share.
The Finder, the Daily Statesman, and the Economy Times.
Okay. I have the Ghanaian Times, Daily Guide, and Punch newspaper. Over to you.
The Daily Statesman has a story on the front page which announces that the Ghana Water River Authority has set aside 20 million cedis to assuage the suffering of victims of the dam spillage. I think this figure came across at the weekend. And we are told that they've spent 9 million out of the 20 million cedis. And they are still looking at our best to rally to the aid of the flood victims. And we will commend them for. But the fact is that VRA did not anticipate the magnitude of the disaster.
No, they did not.
They did not.
I think they missed something in there because, of course, but you see, it's also about control mechanisms. And if we're not careful, if, like I said, if the dam is breached, even neighboring countries will be affected.
Yeah.
And now we would have, caused a humanitarian disaster or crisis in different parts of the sub-region. But the fact still remains that, yes, they knew. Sometimes, too, it's like Engineer Mahama pointed out to me yesterday, it's about the volumes of water upstream coming down towards the dam, which you cannot technically fully gauge or comprehend, no matter how good your forecast is, which is why maybe empty dams, which the tributaries could be channeled to or whatever, could be options. But I want to believe that we would do something like that. But I am almost certain, on the back of flooding every year in Accra, for example, that we'll talk a lot about it. Policymakers and engineers will, this and that, maybe even brilliant proposals will come forth. We may do nothing, and God forbid, it may come again, and we'll start talking about it. That's what doesn't make sense about our country.
Not at all. It's an indictment on our sense of planning, and this is a time to apply science and technology in total. And this disaster can be a blessing in disguise. So it will help us to think outside the box and find a long-term solution. Because as we've said, and it bears repeating, that climate change will induce more spillages, and this will also inflict more damages and suffering on the people. Yeah. So the time has come to find a permanent solution.
Let's get into
other So we have Ghana Water and Sewage Corporation, Ghana Water Company Limited. Here they've targeted 203 million cedis as revenue. The managing director of the company, Mr. Clifford Bryman, said the company is expected to generate 203 million cedis as revenue by the end of this year, representing a 65% surge from the 2022 revenue generated. I know Galamsey is a major impedimenta block to the progress of the company in certain areas. Because of Galamsey, they cannot even treat water, let alone distribute. So whilst we commend them for the revenue target, we also need to ensure that we deal surgically with the cancer of Galamsey, and this is beyond them. And even the whole state machinery is struggling to solve this problem. So and the media. So this reinforces the need for the media to always put it on the front burner and set the agenda by agitating for more action. Right. To deal surgically with the issue of Galamsey. And the Finder has a story, a major story is on what a Ghana Water Company posting 904 million losses in 6 months. This angle, I've alluded to that they are struggling in certain areas, and certain issues are beyond their control. Galamsey is a dominant one. And so, again, it's a call to all stakeholders to help this critical state institution to overcome its challenges. The other important story here, multinationals show little interest to train and equip locals in oil and gas sector. And this is coming from the sector minister, popularly known as NAPO.
But there are supposed to be laws on that.
Local content law.
So even when they come, I don't want to mention any MNC's name, but there's supposed to be the transfer of technical know-how, knowledge over time, so that locals can also increase their numbers and their know-how. But you see, you can't do this in other parts of the world. Why? Because the systems work. And if you breach the system, they will crack the whip. Here, the whip is lost. There's nothing to crack.
So,
the sector minister getting up to say they are not, it's like taxes. Celine Dion has a song about, love, tax and everything, and some of those things that are very certain. In other jurisdictions, people would want to flout tax. Anybody would want to dodge tax if they had the way of doing that. Why do they not do it in those jurisdictions? Because when you are caught, the consequences are damaging, and you would end up paying through the nose for it. Just as in this instance, if the mechanisms are in place, you will not breach. But the mechanisms are not in place, so they will find ways of breaching them. It's like preaching to the choir.
Certainly, they said that Ghana is not deficient in laws, but what we lack is the power to implement them. So, and it is sad that even in the area of welding, the percentage of Ghanaians in that sector is minuscule as compared to Nigerians.
Yeah.
So, with urgent promptitude, we need to reverse the trend. And it's not enough to point out our deficiencies, our lack of action. What is most important is to ensure that Ghanaians capture the commanding height of our oil industry after 16 years of oil discovery in this country.
And after what? How many years of real exploration? From around 2010?
Yeah.
Thereabouts. 2008, 2010, getting into. So we are gradually, another thing, food for thought. We've done close to 15 years of proper oil exploration in our country. And maybe we should also be sitting down and asking ourselves, after 15 years, what has oil done for us? We haven't fallen to the Dutch disease, which is the resource curse that some people will talk about. But then again, you look at what the real boons are of exploring oil. You would have thought that with oil market prices rising on the back of the Russo-Ukrainian war and everything, we could have called some shots internally and said, oh, we'll do this and do that. But we're toothless. We can't do anything. Our oil production is not akin to maybe the Angolas and the Nigerians.
Yeah, sure.
But our local fuel, what are we doing with it? That's the question.
But our production levels are significant as compared to others.
I'm just saying that while it's significant, it may not be comparable to Libya. Or Nigeria, or Angola, the big players.
Yeah, sure.
But we are still big. What are we doing with those resources? And even some of our petroleum revenue, where they should end up per the law. So you see why sometimes it becomes difficult. Like you said, policies are there,
but
following them.
One area in which our oil resources have been put to most effective is free SHS. Free SHS. But free SHS is one area Ghanaians are benefiting from our oil resources. And experts have been calling for long-term funding for...
And that is the problem.
Yeah.
How it's going to be. It's sustainability, which has been brought into question by a number of academics and CSOs and others. We'll just see. I mean, because policies without sustainability, something to roll them out, which again brings me to parts of the world like Norway. You know, they have some funds for future generations for their oil wealth and all of that. Sometimes you just ask yourself what our planning is for the future. It appears we have even the food of the future we are consuming now. So you ask yourself, because the next generation will come and deal with harsher climate change. They'll come and deal with worse flooding. They may experience earthquakes. They may have world-shifting problems to deal with. Not even may. They will have those to deal with. Our financial status as a country is in a bubble. So you ask yourself, what are we leaving for the next generation? Cocoa farms, for example, are going. The South Americans at a point, because of some diseases, I don't know whether it's swollen shoot or whatever, Brazil was once the second largest producer of cocoa. They ceded that position on the back of... They are coming back. And do you know what advantage they have?
And maybe China.
Swathes of land, and one farmer can farm vast areas. Here we have small acre, and our productivity levels have dwindled by a lot, partly on the back of that. So you look at the future and you ask yourself, what future are we handing over to that generation?
So the future looks bleak, and it's not a basket case. So it's up to the policymakers, implementers, and all of us to ensure that we secure the future for the present and future generations.
Let me quickly do 2 papers, and then I'll let you come in with the Economy Times as we wrap. The Ghanaian Times, upstream petroleum sector, Deputy Speaker slams low local input after 10 years of local content law passage. So you see exactly what we're talking about. Local content law passed. A decade
after.
Yet we're talking about low local input. Now who caused them?
We cause them.
Military personnel not withdrawn from MEPE operations. That's according to the Ghana Armed Forces. Naval Captain Labi there speaking. You know, there was talk about their evacuation, and then there was a counter from the Ghana Armed Forces that no, there was some redeployment, but others were still on the ground doing the work. We need to train more specialist doctors in Ghana. Professor Adanu appeals to government. That story on page 3. And 493,400 visually impaired persons lack white cane. The white cane. Do you know, this story has been, and let's not restrict it, because I think many years ago, the same story came to the fore. And here we are again with these same, and these are the vulnerable ones in our society.
Who speaks for them? Who advocates for them?
Let me go to page 13 and just quickly do those stories. That will be the only one from the Ghanaian Times. So, the rector of the Ghana College of Physicians and Surgeons, Professor Richard Adanu, has appealed to government for support in its quest to double the training of specialist doctors for the country. According to him, though the rate of production of specialists in the country has seen much improvement following the establishment of the college 20 years ago, the numbers did not meet the needs or requirements of the country. Quote, when we look at the numbers, one of the reasons the college was set up was because of the slow production of medical specialists in the country. And over the past 20 years, the rate of production is much better than it was when the college was set up. So in that sense, the college has been successful. However, if you look at the number of specialists in relation to our population, we are still not hitting the mark that we need to. And this is the issue, especially with a lot of our specialist doctors. I have a friend, specialist. She's left the country. And there are many others like her. UK, US, Australia, Canada. The other one is the 493,000. That is 40% of Ghana's visually impaired population who do not own a white cane, thereby inhibiting their mobility and social inclusion. And statistics from the 2021 census indicate that 1.2 million out of the 30.8 million population have varying degrees of visual impairment, from total blindness to slight visual impairment. This is the situation. I have a friend, thankfully, Nkrumah. I was speaking with him recently. He was called to the bar recently. He's visually impaired. I remember when he had to get into Makola, and some of the things I had to personally do. We support these people, and when they get to that point, it is brilliant because they can imagine if he didn't even have a white cane. And sometimes, I remember in law school at Legon, he would have a friend, a colleague, holding him and bringing him. But we can do better. We can.
We can, certainly, yes. So Nkrumah should serve as a beacon of hope for people in such situations.
The Daily Guide, I think I've done the major story there. MPP slams Mahama for politicizing Volta floods and debunks the fake news aspect of it. There's court directs OSP to respond to Bisu's objection. I'm talking about Charles Bisu, formerly of the Interministerial Committee on Illegal Mining. And First Guy Group storms the MEPE with goodies and insurance. Any other stories to wrap?
There's a story by Economy Times quoting the Bank of Ghana as reporting that availability of jobs in the country has risen slightly in August 2023. The figures they quoted in total are 2,775 job adverts as compared to 2,467 for the same period in 2022. Our prayer is simply this should crystallize into availability of jobs for the teeming unemployed in this country. We are told it's a time bomb waiting to explode. We should always lodge at the back of our minds that the youth are a preponderant force which can make this country. So
by 2050, it is said that our youthful population will be far above 50%.
Sure.
What are we preparing for them by way of jobs, by way of a future?
So we should sharpen our focus on their needs in order to save this country from explosion and implosion.
Afel Money, thank you as always for joining us.
It's a huge pleasure.
Making this so enjoyable, animating it for us. We're very grateful for your time, sir.
Welcome.
Afel Money is former president of the Ghana Journalists Association. He joined us for this conversation. For all of you who joined the conversation today, we're grateful to you for making the time to be with us every morning. For those of you celebrating, I beg your pardon, celebrating anything today, it could be an anniversary, special day. It could be a birthday. If it's your birthday, happy birthday to you out there. If it's a special anniversary you're celebrating, well, enjoy the day and make the most of it. Life is crucial. Don't take it for granted. We'll end with something on health. Endpoint Homeopathic Clinic, as always, helping us bring you this segment. And here's what they have to say to you. If you're a man, you've not checked your prostate in a while, especially if you're 30 and above. Nowadays, it's not 50 and above. People under even 30 are coming up with prostate complications. Just make your way to Endpoint Homeopathic Clinic for free screening. If you're a woman and you're concerned about your fertility, or you've had issues, or you're not even sure what's happening as far as your fertility is concerned, make your way to Endpoint Homeopathic Clinic and they'll screen you for free, gratis. Here's where you can locate them. In the crowd. They're at Spintex, opposite the Shell signboard. In Kumasi, Kronomwabwe here, behind the Angel Educational Complex. Takrade and Naji Estates is where you can find them. Tema Community 22, Techiman Hanswa and Siamansama. Their call lines 0244 867068 or 0274 234 321. Endpoint Homeopathic Clinic, the end to chronic disease. But let's talk sports now. A whole lot in that world coming up next with Muftau Nabila Abdullahi. Do stay.